That means I need to feedback after the round, and we find out afterwards, after the break, what the result is. Anyway, enough answering that question. So the motion about this House believes that the United Kingdom should impose punitive trade terms on the United Kingdom. House invites the Prime Minister to defend the motion that stands in the name.
Mr. Speaker, this is a debate about a global trade system. This is a debate about the European Union and trying to preserve its image and its integrity. We love the European Union coming from opening government. We want to preserve its integrity. We want, in the long term, maybe for the UK to rejoin it. We want this sort of system in order to benefit the parties in today's debate. What we think is the key contention in today's debate is number one, who can prove that this model is principally justified, but number two, about how this leads to better outcomes for trade and for people on the ground. What we say on our side is that punitive trade terms look like things such as, for example, not giving the benefits that they previously had in the EU system. That is to say that we impose higher tariffs on UK imports, for example. It now costs more in order for UK businesses to want to penetrate your market. That means that it's more hard in order for a UK business to want to succeed in the global economy. It means that sometimes we think that it's worth the trade-off in order for some businesses to suffer in the short term, if that means that people on the ground re-evaluate what they currently think of the EU, change their stance on it, and eventually want to come to a better deal with the European Union. Right? We also think that you won't have like this sorts of special economic zones that you currently get in partnership with the EU. We would deny them all these sorts of things. We think that uniquely our benefits materialize at a point at which it is punitive and it hurts people on the ground. Right? But here's the thing. Right? So on our side, what we envision for our side of the house is that, number one, we would support in the long term, for example, UK people to re-evaluate what happened with the Brexit referendum and what exactly the harms are to them at the point at which they left the EU, to reconsider this, realize that the campaign was based on lies, and want to have a better deal and have better economic cooperation with the European Union. Right? So just to like set it up, right? We really support the European Union. We think it brings people many benefits, such as free immigration, the ability for you to move around, get economic mobility, all those sorts of things. We think that the single market is also very beneficial for businesses in the area, and we think that we have like agreements like trade protections are also extremely beneficial later. So what are we going to say? I think that we make the first concession. Yes, we accept maybe in the short term some UK people are going to be left out in the cold. Maybe some businesses are going to suffer in the short term. Why is this worth the trade-off? We think this debate is about large scale. This is about a literal country and the implications that that has when you join something like the EU. We think that the EU is not perfect, but it's better than standing alone as a country. I then forward two arguments to you. Number one, why we get better outcomes for individuals on the ground, and number two, why this is principally justified in preserving the image of the European Union and why it essentially needs to impose punitive trade terms, right? Number one, better outcomes. Realize that the premise of this argument is that the Brexit vote was one that was inherently based on lies. That is to say, you have things like the Red Bus campaign that has like $300 million that they said was lost from the NHS, right? It also looks like Farage and Johnson like scapegoating immigrants, these sorts of things. These sorts of things impeded people's ability to choose the sort of economic mobility and economic benefits that you would get as a result. What we change at the outside of the house is to realize when you leave the European Union, you will not be treated lightly. That is to say that for the first time, your literal livelihoods are affected at a point at which a company like Ford, which gets 94% of their parts from the EU, currently has to displace tens of thousands of workers. People realize for the first time that this is actually the sorts of harms that they get if they leave something as important as the European Union. What do we think are the outcomes of this, right? Number one, we get the sorts of protests and demonstrations that we think are already quite effective, such as the Black Cab strike, which literally stop London from working for a few days. These are the sorts of things that we think will really urge Boris Johnson to want to reconsider the sort of trade that he has with the European Union. Because realize that Boris Johnson is currently really uncompromising, right? And that is to say that he's literally threatened to not have a deal with the EU at all. We think that's far worse under their side of the house because at that point you harm more people. we also think, right, like for example, this will be effective for a few reasons. Number one, I think that the EU is like a coalition of like 30 plus states, and therefore they have strong bargaining power as compared to the UK as one single market. But also realize that many like rich people are also strongly against this whole idea of Brexit, right? That's just to say like companies like Dyson move to Singapore, and these sorts of people we think have strong political will in order to change the current system. Before I explain why this is principally justified, opening.
If your analysis seems to suggest that the campaign for Brexit is riddled with lies and misinformation, why then do you think there was actual consent by the individual that selected to have Brexit? And why is it fair to punish people who acted on misinformation?
Yes, because that's exactly what we want to change. The misinformation in and of itself warrants this sort of punitive trade terms so that people are finally able to realize. Structurally, you have like media narratives on your side of the house that do not allow people to see what leaving the European Union actually does. We finally change that under our side of the house. We think it's a worthy trade-off. A second argument, why is this principally important in preserving the integrity of the European Union, right? We think that it ought to take a harsh stance. Number one, the UK has actively like compromised EU people and EU workers, right? It's like it's directly affected them. What does this look like? The fact that you currently don't subscribe to like free immigration and the single market means that tens of thousands of workers are currently losing their jobs. These are the sorts of things that the UK has like done as a result of them leaving the European Union, right? We think that it is in the mandate of the European Union to stand up for its structural integrity and say that if you are not part of our coalition, if you do not want to have the sort of multilateral trade terms that actually benefit us, you are also not going to reap those same kinds of benefits. We think there are two important outcomes of this, right? Like considering the premise that we think that the European Union is great, I think number one, it means that other countries are less likely to want to leave, right? So countries such as like Greece or Italy that are currently considering that they want to leave, realize that this is a form of deterrence in order for them to remain. That leaving is far worse because you will be affected by punitive trade agreements that literally like affect your economy. But number two, I think that it also primarily right now in the status quo, at the point at which Boris Johnson is currently making agreements with the EU, it makes him re-evaluate how he wants to approach these negotiations, right? It means that he realizes that his main voter bloc, like working class individuals who are who need to rely on EU benefits of the economy, realize that he needs to be more compromising, that he needs to make certain concessions in order to stay in power. For all these reasons, we think what this debate is ultimately about is preserving the EU integrity and making sure that people's lives are better in the long term. For all those reasons, we're very proud to propose.
I think it is important to note that the wording of the motion suggests this House believes that the EU should not do something, not this House as the EU should not do something, suggests to me that in the value judgment debate, it isn't just about the economic incentives or the personal interests of the EU, rather this debate assesses the impact of any potential policy on the global community and all countries affected. This means to say, if it is true that side of OG already concedes that to a large extent this policy is going to screw over the lives of Britons, but more importantly, I'm also going to explain the poorest people in the Europe itself, we don't understand why the comparative of potentially bringing the UK back into that, given the lack of process on that side of the House, is something that's worth trading off the livelihood and the welfare of all these individuals right now. In this speech, I will show you firstly what exactly the scale of this harm and why they're so important and why necessarily the comparative on the that side is worse. Secondly, I'll show you, in terms of the livelihood, secondly, I'll show you how necessarily trade barriers having a chilling effect on trade in general does not benefit any party involved, and then show you why the comparative to status quo is preferable. Before that, sure.
So what does opening opposition support? Are you going to let them enter the benefits of
status quo? So the status quo is basically there's a hard border between the UK and Europe right now. That means to say that to some extent there is a reduction of trade. We just do not want any further punitive trade terms imposed on them within the deal that Boris Johnson received from the EU. It's already good enough. So, framing aside, we think the value judgment debate needs to assess not just the things of the EU. But even if by their own logic, right, they want to assess the interests of the EU, notice under that side, and I'll move into responses here, that there's very little process analysis of explaining how punitive trade terms lead to the UK wanting to come back. Notice that firstly, if you look at the incentives of the UK government, most governments have an incentive to remain strong and project a strong image to their people and the countries around them. This means to say that you exerting punitive trade views on the UK government makes it far less likely they would ever want to come back to the negotiating table or ever want to come back to the EU to start with, right? We will also argue that the perception you give towards individuals on the ground, if you want to have some kind of democratic referendum, is necessarily a negative one, and it's difficult for people to understand why a life in the EU will be comparatively better, given the fact that the EU is screwing them over right now. The second thing to say is that in the event, the only other way that this could possibly happen is for somehow the second referendum to be forced. We think the cost then is the political upheaval and the entire fuckfest that happened with the Brexit right now. Repeating again, we think this entire process, firstly, has no positive outcome for anything involved. Secondly, no explanation as to why there's something comparatively better. And thirdly, necessarily exerts the cost on individuals who are involved. The next thing I want to respond to is to do with the comparative, right? Because they say that people's lives are really sad right now, and understandably, the whole Brexit is not an ideal situation at all. But your side of the house makes it far worse under your side, right? Your side of the house makes the life of the individual far worse, and we don't understand why the comparative is better. Lastly, in terms, if they say that the lives of the people are so bad that companies are moving out already, and that there's not a lot of people within the UK right, or within the EU right now, it is unclear why comparatively under your side, even if the UK comes back to the EU, all these companies come back into the UK to start with. This means to say that your side of the house, even if your best case scenario, you still have to build them from the ground up. You still have to drag all these companies back. We think the comparative on the outside is just to leave companies as they are. It's far easier to leave them in than to drag them in after they have gone out. So, arguments. Firstly, why we think imposing punitive measure of the UK is likely to harm the people of the UK disproportionately, right? And I think that the analysis more or less is we agree with side of open government, positive trade views makes it harder to move goods and services throughout the UK, throughout the economy. Labour movement is restricted, necessarily means the cost of living increase because the cost of labour, the cost of goods and services increase. This means that it hurts the poorest people, individuals on the ground who are not able to afford basic goods and services, raises the price of food, raises the price of medicine, makes it far harder for them to live their life. We think that this is a direct effect on individuals on the ground who do not trade the harm of those individuals off for the potential benefit of the UK coming back. But more importantly, let's ask whether or not the cost imposed on these individuals is fair. Because that's what the House concedes that to a large extent, the information campaign ran by Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson was one that was extremely coercive, one that's extremely manipulative, and even after all of that, the referendum to pass the Brexit vote was narrowly by a 0.7 margin of that, right? It was 50.3% voted to want to leave the referendum. What all of this means is that we don't think people on the ground in the UK necessarily consented to all the harms that existed, unlike all the harms that existed within Brexit right now. But more importantly, do not consent and do not warrant by agency the kinds of punitive measures that side of the house is going to impose on the UK people right now. You are necessarily going to make their lives worse. You are necessarily going to increase the cost of living, necessarily going to increase inflation and make their life extremely more harmful. Even if that side of the house wants to argue that these referendums want a democracy, we don't think the people consented to the entire process that happened afterwards when it couldn't form a parliament, right? When somebody tried to push a soft Brexit to get the best deal for UK and the people pushed her out when she stepped down. We don't think anyone in the UK consented to the fuckfest that the UK is right now, and therefore we think it's unfair for that side of the house to continue pushing them, to continue worsening the situation of those individuals right there in exchange for a potential benefit. Secondly, so the comparative is both under that side. So secondly, why we think that chilling effect on trade hurts all people involved. So the basis of trade is simple. You have comparative advantages. You're able to produce goods and services cheaper under your side because you have certain resources, maybe you have exclusive benefits, whatever. It just means that countries involved in trade, because it's mutually beneficial to both sides who engage in trade. The reason that punitive trade barriers or reducing the trade between the EU and the UK is hurtful for all members involved is for a large extent because trade barriers makes it harder for you to move goods and services between the EU and the UK. Understand that even though the UK is in an economic downturn, they are still one of the most developed countries in the world. They have one of the best healthcare systems in the world. They have access to a amount of research and technology and the standards of education, Oxford and Cambridge and all that stuff over there. They are still a pretty powerful player in the world. What this means is that the EU loses out firstly, in a lot of possible trade benefits, at the point where they impose punitive trade terms on the UK, and UK may not necessarily want to trade with them in the future. But the reason this is harmful is because losing out in terms of efficiency makes the life of poorer individuals, both in Balkan states such as Greece and Italy, far worse off because they are the people hurt the most by an increase in prices and a reduction of equality. We also think that on a comparative, your best alternative on your side is trading with people such as the US and Southeast Asia, all of which may be viable trade partners, but firstly does not exist right now, but secondly imposes a travel cost in terms of transportation of goods and services, but more importantly a lack of research and development and technology that UK has to offer. All these things mean is, number one, not in the interest of Euro to do so, it hurts the lives of individuals on the ground the most, and for all those reasons we beg to oppose.
I think it's weird for side of opening opposition to tell us that they want status quo when status quo is already so uncertain. Boris Johnson is heading towards a no deal, no negotiation. He threatened to pull out of all negotiations from the EU. Boris Johnson is extremely harsh and recognized when they say Theresa May voted for a soft EU, but then got voted out of the parliament, means in status quo, there's not enough support for more negotiations towards the EU. Status quo, people don't realize that the lies and how damaging Brexit was towards them. In status quo, there's not enough support for more negotiations. There's not enough support, and Boris Johnson doesn't see the concern of the voter bloc to push him towards better negotiations or to push him towards rejoining the EU in the long term. We think that all the benefits that they say that they want to have trade with the EU, have all these long parts of TJ's speech telling us how the EU is so beneficial to the UK won't even happen in status quo if Boris Johnson has a no deal or it's severely minimized. So I think they need to tell us what is going to happen if the EU just doesn't have the same benefits, or if the EU doesn't do anything, because Boris Johnson is taking it so lightly. But secondly, we also think it's not just about the UK, it's also about preserving the EU. Because recognize if we take them on their best case, that the negotiations will go so well that they don't even prove to us, then if it's true that other countries can still enjoy the same benefits as being in the EU while still not having to contribute towards the EU, it means that the EU will fail eventually. That the EU will never be able to maintain its integrity. There's no point of the EU, why would countries pay towards the EU if they can still reap the same benefits? This means that the integrity of the EU will be severely undermined, which they don't tell us what happens. Recognize that, and this goes into my responses, recognize that the importance of the EU and the reason why the EU is important is just there's joint cooperation between all the countries. All the countries contribute towards it. All the countries make certain compromises. So there's a benefit towards everyone. But if it's true that everyone will somehow enjoy the benefits without contributing towards the EU, then the EU can never exist. So we think that the EU has to be harsh. The EU has to show that if you don't contribute, you will not reap the same benefits, to set a precedent for other countries not to leave and to maintain its integrity. The third thing they say is that it's already so bad anyways, that there's already a lot of uprising, that there's already people being angry. We think that is not true to one extent, because recognize if it's true that just a few months ago Theresa May got voted out of Parliament, she couldn't garner enough support for a soft deal and proper negotiations towards the EU, means it's still true that some people still believe in those Brexit lies, that some people still believe that the EU is contradictory towards British interest, that Boris Johnson is still being able to get away. We think that instead of we need to put a stop towards it, and we need to show them, even if I think all the political upheaval that is going to arise, it's one that's worth it, because it's for the long-term benefits that the people in the EU will maintain, and people within the UK. So for a long-term benefit, we also don't think it will be a very long process. We think that the Parliament should have people realize that they're being fucked over. They're likely to have large-scale demonstrations. Boris Johnson can't continue because recognize his own voter bloc is individuals in the working class who realize they are being screwed over, so they like to have large-scale pressure. Boris Johnson likes to take negotiations far more seriously. The fourth thing they say, and I find this so weird, they say that the countries want to show they have a strong stance, so they will never retract. But that is the UK for so many years. But secondly, if it's true that Boris Johnson, the only reason he's being voted in is because of the voting debate. So it doesn't matter what he feels. If everyone else thinks that they're being screwed over and like all their benefits are being harmed, and the UK is in so much harm, they're likely to want to vote him out. Then like, his position is in stake. So why would he care about like his reputation that they don't even at stake if people are going to vote him out and there's a large scale upheaval within the country? So we still think that he's likely to take negotiations far seriously and it's going to be better. The fifth thing they say is that people never consented to the harms. The campaign was coercive and hence punishing them is like wrong because in principle it's wrong because these are people who are innocent. But correct. Under that logic, they are going to suffer more on your world because like, there will never be a proper negotiation. They are going to like lose benefits in the long term. You don't tell us what's going to happen like in the long term to them if the possibility is that there will be a no deal. So I think in the long term, these are also people who are going to be harmed. But secondly, we think that you don't deal with a lot of the other people who voted for a Brexit because they were fat, because they still believe in it. We need to break that monotony for like a long-term benefit. First argument, and extending on what John said, why it's important for the EU to do this. Just recognize, if it's true that on their world, and that's recognizing their best case scenarios, the EU is soft on the UK and gives them like a lot of privileges that they still are entitled to a lot of things. This means that the narrative now is swung towards Boris Johnson's campaign that recognize that even if we don't give to a lot, even if we don't contribute a lot towards the EU, it was at the first when we were being manipulated that oh we gave a lot but we never received a lot. Now it literally like makes the whole like half the voter bloc who voted for Brexit, that it makes them seem like they are right because it was like they were going to get those benefits anyway, so they contributed for nothing. We think that at that point there's less pressure for like going against Brexit, and that's harmful because then you're like entitled to Boris Johnson's Brexit campaign, and we think that's really harmful for the EU in general. So now we think that if EU has harsh stances, people realize that what they were giving is far less than what they were receiving. That's when like you are able to retract on all those lies that Brexit fed. And I think people come back to reality. Just recognize on your world, a lot of people get more entitled, a lot of people are fed with even more lies that they could have got those benefits anyways, and that what they were paying is unnecessary, and all their contributions is unnecessary. We think this brings them back to reality. But this is the second part. I think that on your world, if you just give people benefits and like, oh, it's still the same and you don't contribute, a lot of other countries will leave. A lot of other countries who still want to benefit but don't want to contribute are able to use the same narrative to their people. Like right-wing populism is so much more entitled, and they are able to use the same narrative to tell people we can leave but we will still be able to get those same trade benefits. People don't see the importance of the EU, and hence it gets a lot more worse because the EU can't maintain its integrity. Chair realized that on their world they will have nothing in the end because like the EU will like never be able to maintain its integrity. And like it gets a lot worse. Thank you.
I think like if you listen to the opening government's case, it was really, really insensitive. Because what we heard from opening government was that we want to teach people a lesson so they know how shitty their lives is. So maybe in future we can get some speculative benefit of them rejoining and learning their lesson. No, this process of instrumentalizing the lives of people to teach them a lesson so in future people 50 years down the road can somehow join the EU to get future benefits is bizarre. I don't understand why we need to prioritize the future existence of the European Union and future lives over the current suffering of individuals. They need to tell us why teaching them a lesson is something that is morally justified, given their own analysis that these people were manufactured into consenting because it was riddled by lies. If it is true, then their policy that is acting on the campaign of Brexit is something that is illegitimate, primarily because the systems of election that led to Brexit was built on that misinformation, meaning people did not necessarily consent to the harms that we talk about. So teaching them a lesson is something that practically only lead to a speculative benefit at best. But second, even if it does, we're not sure why that trade-off should bend towards people in the future as opposed to people that are currently living. We think that was problematic to begin with. The second thing I want to point out in terms of comparative responses is this strange idea that the reason why we want this to happen is because we want to teach the people in UK a lesson. Like, first and foremost, we don't understand because the whole speech was shifting on Boris Johnson. Like, Boris Johnson is very terrible, Boris Johnson is very terrible. Like, the guy is not going to lose any sleep, guys. They're making shit tons of money. The people who are going to lose sleep is individuals on the ground who are poor. Your mechanism, right, is the poor people going to uprising and tell Boris Johnson, now you are bad, is very speculative because number one, a lot of the reasons why people voted for Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage is precisely because of all these anti-immigrant and xenophobic sentiments that transcend things like mere economic policy. If it's true that they only want to access rational assessments of economic policy, I don't think these people are going to be voted in. Voter bases are sometimes stupid. Look at US, people vote Donald Trump because of like specific fractions of his identity as opposed to just voting based on rationality. Your analysis that voter blocks only vote on rationality does not cohere with reality, and even if it does not lead on, like, does not prove that mechanism of change that you want to happen. I'm just going to talk about one extension thing, then I want to move on to the big extension. The extension we're going to talk about is why this leads to the most vulnerable people, not just in the UK, but in the EU, getting systematically disenfranchised by race-based political parties that push xenophobia, causing the reduction of trying to accept people like refugees, and it's just bad for minorities. So I just want to use and borrow the example Jonathan mentioned previously. He said he wants more things like the Black Cap riots and all. 2 days after that shit bore down, Muslims were literally shot in Manchester and in the Manchester train, subway or whatever they call it. I don't understand why that's something that's positive that they will stand for, so that future, one day, things might get better. Okay, in terms of extension material, no thank you. So first thing we want to talk about is why, so A, they don't change the minds of Boris Johnson. B, it's a principally unfair policy on the most vulnerable. That in mind, OG has nothing to stand on. Let's talk about extension material so that hopefully Patrick don't steal a lot of things in closing. Okay, why do we think we want to have this geopolitical impact? So the first thing I think we need to understand is that why individuals vote for race-based parties or individuals that promote xenophobic sentiments is because of inequality in the economic conditions. So if your economic needs are met, it is far less likely that you will blame immigrants for their falling. So for example, your far-right parties in Greece, or for example, Viktor Orban in Hungary, do things that are very, very extreme to minorities. So for example, they collectivize on outing minorities by saying that they are the reason for my economic situation. What your side does, by entrenching them in an economic system of poverty, means that ultimately, these people are likely to still funnel that kind of rhetoric that you are the reason why we are poor, that the reason why we are kept in economic doldrums is precisely because of immigrants that are coming to steal our jobs. You funnel the same right-wing rhetoric that pre-existed your Brexit campaign to lead to the same cyclical impact that currently exists. What does this world look like? The chilling on trade by the government bench creates this cycle of debt trap where people of color will be used as a scapegoat for all of this economic downfall. This is when you lead, for example, for UKs to say, now because of all the shitty things you are doing to me, I'm going to retaliate by not accepting refugees from the Balkan states. I'm not going to take in Turkish immigrants because you don't want me because you treated me badly. I have no corollary obligation to help these people in the EU because why should I help someone who constantly fucks me over? We think at that point in time, no thank you, we think they create a system that perpetuates this kind of race-based policy that excludes the most vulnerable of individuals by being xenophobic, by casting these people out from that system. We think this is worse because so in the short term, right, the harms are more social. You get things like exclusion, you get things like lynching, you get things like hate speech. But in the long term, we think it's a lot more egregious because what you do is you promote parties that are being essentialized by race. So you get people like Donald Trump being voted in, for example. And actually, not for example, it really happens because Nigel Farage is very xenophobic anyway, he's very anti-immigrant. What you do as a result of being constantly reinforcing this idea is to promote a value, is that the post-Brexit political structures will now be dominated by people who are able to say, you see, I told you the EU was fucked up. And precisely now that it's fucked up, I was right all along. So the idea that now Nigel Farage will change his tone and go hey, yeah, I regret this decision, seems very bizarre. Because the same way you use lies to peddle this campaign is the same way you will weaponize the kind of system that you put them through by saying that these economic conditions, the reason why you are poor is precisely because of this bad guy EU, and that's why, for example, voting in was the correct thing to do. What is the last impact of this? Is that you crystallize race-based and xenophobic parties in power. What this world looks like is very problematic because we think that the assault on economic progress directly results in social tensions, but also means that individuals have a straight vote and will likely treat like minorities even worse as a result of this policy. We say that meeting someone's economic needs create less instability, causes less xenophobia, causes less tension. We are incredibly proud to stand on our position.
incredibly clear that side-opening opposition does not understand Brexit, does not understand EU, and it does not understand the context under which this debate has to happen, right? Recognize that the EU will never come back, especially in the short term, and this debate, since they've literally already exited because of these simple rise of the fact that for example, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson literally rode on a wave of populism to say that Brexit is the thing that should be happening. So that's not the debate that should occur. The debate that should be occurring is what should we do and how should we minimize the harms of Brexit and what is best for the global economy. So I'm going to do a few things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to fill in the gaps of side-opening government in the sense that they didn't explain what exactly the importance of the EU was. I'm going to engage with opening opposition when they tell us things like, oh, it's not principally justified, and also something about poverty, which I think happens anyways, regardless of Brexit or not. And finally, I'm going to extend upon opening government, which is to say that what happens when the EU is jeopardized, because they talked about precedents, but they never actually explained it well. So who is the most important actor in this debate, right? We think that it's going to be the EU because for a few reasons. Firstly, they're a region, so just because of simply the scale of the harm, they protect more vulnerable countries and they help them create economic growth in the region. They set things like monetary policy because of the simple scale of resources. They're able to do things like create environmental policy and attack tech corporations like Facebook, for example, and then control the fate of refugees. Given this, we'll explain later why stability for the EU is so important. But before that, I'm going to go into my rebuttals. We think we take out over OG because we sort this muddle in the sense that we understand that the UK will never come back, that Boris won't reconsider, he'll simply become more defensive. The argument then becomes whether you're given to their wants or not, and we'll also break the deadlock on the short term as well as engage in the long term later. But first, I want to just clarify about their mechanism, right? They simply do not understand what is currently occurring because they say that, oh, we'll just have status quo. But under status quo, there's already contention about will we stay in the singles market indefinitely? What happens with the backstop? They needed to clarify those things, and because they didn't, we think that that simply doesn't stand. But they talked about punitive measures are bad for people on the ground. Firstly, we'll tell you why it's justified. Because recognize, right? They said that Donald Trump was voted in a race-based politics, but that doesn't mean that his election was any less legitimate. These individuals were not only fed with lies, but they were also given access to reasonable people and reasonable politicians who told them the effects of the policy. I think that that is a justification in of itself. But look, right? The simple scale of the poverty that they want to talk about simply does not exist because the UK can still trade with other nations. They're still a strong country in the global economy. It does not result in the economic inequality that they want to talk about that will suddenly devolve into race-based riots and lynching and things like that. We think that, furthermore, the simple long process of Brexit means that people had a chance to choose whether they wanted a soft or a hard Brexit. So people had an active say in this. Give me a moment. They say that EU nations will also be screwed over. We ask simply how, because punitive measures mean they get more funds in taxation to fund their economic growth. Furthermore, the fact that there is a huge network within the EU that gives you cheaper products than the UK is able to provide you. And furthermore, we'll give you a long-term comparative as to why it's worse for people on the ground. Before that, yes.
So OG wants them to reunite. You don't. OG wants them to teach them a lesson and make them pay. You say that there's going to be marginal impact because they can trade with other people. Who's right and why?
Yeah, but they can pay. They still have to pay because it's because they made that decision for themselves, and we don't have to defend the UK rejoining because that's simply not something feasible that's going to happen. They literally already exited. So, furthermore, they give this really weird argument about how it leads to inequality, which I think is completely absurd given the fact that these politicians such as Nigel Farage literally rode in on a wave of populism that said that refugees were not good enough for our country. That's the point of which you would justify those sorts of narratives. But before that, and you think that in their rule they can continue to blame refugees when they have poverty out, whereas under our rule they can't. Because recognize that these individuals on the ground who voted for Brexit will have no one to blame but themselves. Their argument does not stand. So into my extension, right? What happens when the EU is jeopardized? The context under which this debate must happen is one in which movements and like increasingly extreme foreign policy and like governments just trying to like strongman small countries into getting the best deals that they want. This is like, for example, the UK trying to like just dissolve NAFTA and to create like the USMCA or whatever that's called, and for example, trying to strong arm NATO into getting what it wants. We think that at the point in which like populations listen to nationalism and vague notions of, oh, these are my people, I'm to protect myself. Now politicians have to actually justify to them why exactly this sense of nationalism weighs out over the tangible harms that they can see. Because the comparative is that even though the UK may not be like super poor after leaving the EU and after these punitive measures, these small countries on the ground, such as Greece, such as, I don't know, like Italy or something, will have to deal with the ramifications of these harms. That's something they need to prevent, right? Because like recognize that currently countries like Germany and France do not want to opt into the buy-ins that are left by the holes filled by Brexit. They say that, oh, I don't want to pay this certain amount, I will want to leave now. That's the kind of things that will result when you have this sort of precedent set. Under our side, these individuals will now have to weigh out vague pride versus the actual tangible harms that they can see that will be published on newspapers and be in news narratives. Politicians rely on public support, and these sorts of things will not happen at the point in which you do not have that public support afterwards. But yes.
So let's be real, all these Greece, Italy, right, will never leave. You don't need to litter them. They are quite poor, they need you. The people that are likely to leave are the people who are going to be somewhat self-sustaining.
Exactly. That leads me to my next point, right? How you screw over small countries that need to be protected by the EU to protect the most vulnerable people that side opening opposition so wanted to defend. We think that they literally have no choice but to leave, but countries like France and Germany eventually will try to opt out of this system because they feel that they're not getting what they put in, right? We think firstly it's principally wrong to simply abandon these countries who do not get the benefits, who are unable to pay to sustain the gaps that they left. But furthermore, I think that they also have to deal with massive influxes of refugees, which is at the point in which they have the harms that they said would like accrue. But furthermore, you leave them to feel the burden of paying for the sort of programs that they want to fund that already exist, to have to deal with the European Court of Justice. I think that that's the point which those countries cannot deal with that. That's the point which you materialize those harms. But furthermore, like this spills over to the wider region. So when we talk about things like the global economy, I think that the EU is a pretty substantial region in the fact that it contains millions of people and it contains a large proportion of the world economy. So in the long term, the UK, France, and Germany will also get screwed over if you have this sort of chaos erupting within the region. So what is side of closing government told you today? Why is it so important? Why do we differentiate from opening government? We say that the UK won't come back. The question is, how exactly do we deal with the consequences of what happens? We think that it should be to stop countries like Germany and France from exiting, for preventing and prevent like large-scale chaos from erupting within the region. We told you why it's justified to punish these people for their actions, or at least like show them that they do have consequences for their actions. Like they say that there will be large-scale poverty and inequality for the UK. We think that's completely infeasible and go with side closing government.
My speech is going to be structured like an episode of BSM, The Bigger Picture. So what I'm going to do here, and how serious I'm going to take this debate, is to provide clarity. Because when you listen in so far as this debate, no one has provided you actual incentive structures, no one has provided you roadmaps, no one has told you what the heck is the actual justification of when you enact punitive trade deals. Everyone just assumes that you must teach them a lesson. The heck? EU has their own member states making terrible democratic decisions, and you're telling me that now you should do this to teach a non-member state how they should actually run the elections, when firstly you have quite 4 years of people telling you the pros and the cons, and people still re-elected Boris Johnson as recent as last year. So I'm really not sure what the entire case of government is standing on. Besides, we should be like the Old Testament God and teach these people a lesson, because apparently they make stupid decisions. It is not our place. On CEO, what we're going to do is basically to tell you, number one, what actually happens when you perform punitive trade deals and what is the likely ramification going to be. But secondly, will EU break down more likely in their world or in our world? Thirdly, if you listen closely as well, the entirety of government cases to rely on no alternative for UK, as far as they prove to you that the alternative of the UK is to move towards US, and I think that is a terrible enough decision for the EU, because like, hint, there's going to be trade deals, trade wars involved. But fourthly, assuming the best case, and I think Ee Jenn kind of alluded to this as well, that there's a global contagion effect that's taking place, and we need to mention stability. Why stability is best ensured now, and chaos is only started when you directly start imposing punitive deals on them. But I'll just deal with OG and CG because there were a lot of shared material. So the first thing that they say is that there's a propaganda of nationalism versus taking precedence over economic ramifications, and we should tell people that that entire argument is contingent on you being able to get to the minds of the UK citizens. Insofar as these people have already repeatedly shown Euroscepticism, plus they actually re-elected Boris Johnson in, I really don't see how far you're going to make any inroads when it comes to changing their minds. But even if you can change their minds, I actually don't know why is it the incentive structure of these people, considering that they're going to screw over millions and millions of euros being lost just to teach these people a lesson. I think the cost here is far too great for us to take that into consideration as an actual tangible outcome. But also, if you listen closely to them as well, they said, the whole region will be fucked and we're going to prevent future problems from happening for example, people like Germany, people like France. If you listen and follow closely European politics, recently, Eurosceptic parties are getting increasingly in power. They have actually gotten more and more votes. If you actually do this, then the only triggering point wouldn't be about the fact that there are nationalism, propaganda being around. Those things are constant. But the trigger point here will be the amount of effort that this EU is willing to take on a non-member state that have already consented to leaving, but now they are retracting and not honouring their due to allow them to leave, but instead having punitive measures. What it means is that the anti-EU bloc that's already present within EU and within the European Commission is going to get stronger and stronger on your end, and these people will eventually be able to form a viable alternative whereby within the EU there's going to be fractionalization, whereby these states, for example like Hungary, for example like Italy, is going to form together an anti-EU bloc to be able to challenge the benevolence of Germany and France. So in that sense, we say it's even worse when you have your own members rebelling and having some sort of mutiny within your ranks. Alright, 4 arguments on my end. The burden from us is very simple, We don't have to prove that things will get better, just that whatever Gov is doing is infinitely going to make things worse, and I think that's a simple burden for us to take, and it's fair. Firstly, when do you perform punitive trade deals? So if you listen closely to opening government and CG as well, their goal is that, we have to get rid of economic zones, we have to get rid of trade deals. To us, we're okay with them, remaining, because insofar as the contribution that they are giving in the form of UK, and this is somewhat what OG says, is that they are not paying the fees, Well, what they are paying is stability, what they are paying is trade deals, what they are paying is some sort of economic sustenance of the entire Eurozone. So if that's the case that we are providing, we think it is a fair trade-off that we don't pay the fees if we can make a floating economy. Alright, when do we actually have deals? So, you need to realize that the entire government really has no end goal. I don't know what their trade deals aim to achieve, besides just saying that we should teach them a lesson. Insofar as teaching a lesson does not translate to actual economic benefits, I don't know why we ought to do this. But let's just deal with it even further. Right now, EU has been enacting punitive trade deals on people like Indonesia, people like Malaysia. Why? Because there is a strong usage of crude palm oil, there's anti-environment, and a lot of times EU also have to care about their own producers of vegetable oils, for example like canola, for example like sunflower oil. So these are the reasons why they've been doing this punitive trade deal in order to A, increase the legitimacy, or B, to actually prevent creeping in and CPO is really the best vegetable oil. So at least there's an angle inside because they know what they want. But in this instance, I really don't know what's in it for the EU, because insofar as we're able to say that currently EU is already seen as an increasingly unjustifiable oligarchy that's literally oligopoly, that's wiping out people in order to form its own bloc. But at least in the instance that I mentioned earlier, there's the financial justification towards it, that people are on board with it. Right now, what you're seeing is increasingly going against what normal conventions are just to carry out your own plans. People are going to be increasingly against you, and people are less likely to enter into trade deals with EU as a bloc. What they're going to do instead is enter into bilateral relationships with the countries directly, and this is harmful towards the EU because now the member states are increasingly not seen as a bloc, which is what EU is famous for, but rather dealing with these individual countries, which means that EU loses more legitimacy in the long run because people bypass EU in order to trade directly with countries, and that is bad. And people always look for alternatives, right? And this moves on, this segues nicely to my second argument. What will Boris Johnson do? So I think it's somewhat true on both sides that maybe the guy isn't very bright. But what he's likely to do is that he has a very strong ally in the form of Trump. So Trump has lost BB as an ally. Trump is currently cuddling up with Modi. But what Trump and Boris Johnson have in common are their xenophobic views, their populist sentiments, and they're also willing to work together, and they have no problem so far. Meaning to say that if the UK is unable to penetrate the market and form deals with the EU, they're likely going to turn towards the United States. And what United States have managed to do so far is to protect allies via enacting retaliatory trade deals on its other opponents. Meaning, now EU might see itself as an unnecessary target that's on US's range because US and EU are are really not very chummy, what they're going to do right now is, in order to see as a protectionist measures of its allies, going to start enacting trade deals on them. And this fits, by the way, directly in line with Trump's protectionistic measures of its economy. So we think that there's a high chance that this is going to happen. We don't want to take that risk. Third argument, what EU benefits from that? Firstly, we have to prevent the market contagion. Right now, you need to realize that if you screw over UK's economy because of its geographical proximity and the interchangeability of the economies, there's going to be a contagion that affects EU as well. So I don't know, like if you recently see Corona affected the whole world's stock market, everyone crashed at the same time. So we see that if UK goes down, EU stocks go down as well. Secondly, the stability. But thirdly, proximity of course means that you have to prevent right creep to actually challenge a lot of EU policies. But lastly, let me just get to EU breakdown. Currently, a lot of people already are unhappy with the EU, including their own member states. When you do this, there's going to be sanctions that we are seeing is unjustifiable. It gives even more political ammo towards the people within your own EU ranks that's trying to tear down the party. We think that all those are far too much a cost to teach them a lesson. We would rather not do it. Thank you.
Here, here.
Okay.
What we saw from the previous speech was simply reducing our whole case to just simply teaching us a lesson. We didn't do that. It's not only about teaching people a lesson, it's to signal to people that if you choose to prioritize your nationalistic sentiments, if you choose populism, there is a block that will stop you. For all the racist people out there, they now have to think that if I follow this vague guy's sentiments, the harms of what happened in the UK will happen to me, and maybe I should prioritize my own economic safety over my nationalistic sentiments that this guy is shouting against me. That was the nuance coming from closing government that was unresponded to by the member of opposition. We also saw like 4 extensions in 1 minute, so I'll try to respond to all of them. I'll try it in like 1 minute or so. Okay? So they said that right now, what will happen in the EU is that a lot of individuals will see these people as very radical, very bad people, and we're going to bypass the EU and try to have more of these trade deals. They also said that now the EU will be targeted by the US. I think that's one simple response towards this, which is a lot of times in political conflicts, although countries may ally with certain people, in terms of economic sense, they won't trade their, they won't use their political allegiance and seep into their economic policies. Because a lot of times the EU is a very strong ally to have, right? So you don't have to necessarily go against the EU or because you want the UK as an ally. A lot of times countries flip-flop in their political policies and still have economic trade deals with many people. The reason as to why this is true, because even without the UK, the EU is still a very strong party, sit down, who shows a strong party and economic zone in which you do not want to piss off. So I think more often than not, what the US will do is probably flip-flop and be like, oh, we can't believe that the EU did this, but you still have these trade deals because Trump is also self-interested in the Americans' like welfare. So I think it's actually important for him to like balance these things out. So I don't think all of a sudden, because we have punitive trade deals, suddenly the US would pull out of one of the biggest trade blocs in the world. I don't think Trump will do well in the elections if he does that, right? 3 issues in today's debate. Firstly, in response to opening opposition, was this vote fair and should we carry out these punitive measures? Secondly, and thirdly, populism and the sustainability of the EU. I think the clash between all the houses, right? So firstly, was this vote fair? So opening government said this thing where a lot of people were misdirected, right? And opening opposition tried to capitalize on this by saying that it's because people were misdirected, that's why this is principally unjust. I have a few things to say about this. I think firstly, there were other avenues to get your information from. So while it's true that there were a lot of lies and political bad things going on, I think individuals had the opportunity to educate themselves or have any other avenues to work. Note that also Brexit happened in like a long period of time, meaning that even after they voted for Brexit, there were still votings and like political, like people opinions on whether they should have a hard or soft Brexit. I think that's sufficient amount of time for you to educate yourself. And if you were lied towards people, like even in the worst case, everyone was lied to. I think like that's just the problem with elections. And if elections, some people make misinformed decisions, you still have to bear the consequences of these misinformed decisions to begin with. So we pity those people who were misinformed, but they had the opportunity to inform themselves and they still made the vote, so I think they should have the consequence of their decision. Secondly, on populism, sit down. I think this is the clash between the closing houses, right? Because I think everyone agrees to the extent that populism is rising. What happens then? I think how we entered this debate is to say that a lot of times all these anti-EU blocs that CO was talking about, what happens now and how do we diminish their ability to do stuff? I think, honestly, if the UK doesn't have any punitive measures, all these individuals can easily talk to their skeptics and say that it's okay, we'll just have hard borders, but we can still access all the benefits of the EU, right? I think, to be fair, OG already clarified that. I think the second response, and sit down, is how we affect the mentality of individuals right now. Because what this lesson does is that individuals will realize that there are actual factual, consequential harms that happen towards people who wrote on nationalistic sentiments, right? In a world in which a racist person wants to vote for this racist person, policy, a lot of the opposition will use the UK as an example of this is what happens if you choose your nationalist sentiments and to leave the EU. So maybe we have to have some immigration, but the trade-off is that we get better trade deals and access to the EU. I think that's a legitimate, I'm not sure if we can defeat populism, but I think we give another argument towards people as to why populism isn't the best thing in the world. Sit down. Also note that Ee Jenn gave this sort of nuance about how populism really works. A lot of times it's not really factual, it's just on nationalistic sentiments, like this is for the people, this is for us. I think giving a concrete harm of this in the air sentiment provides better better opposition against these particular policies. The second level of this is in terms of how are immigrants treated, right? Because they say that immigrants will be the scapegoat now. Sit down, I'll talk my God. I think this is a bit weird, right? Because I get that people will be more angry, the UK will be more angry at the EU, but they don't have anyone to scapegoat but themselves, right? In a world in which you do not have this punitive measure, they can easily blame the immigrants. But now you have to blame your immigration policy because as a result of me doing this, these are the consequences that I've had to face. I'll take you after closing.
Yeah, if Brexit was indeed illegitimate, why did EU allow them to invoke the article and leave only to now allocate them via punitive trade deals? What is EU so hell-bent on about nationalism?
No. So it was a legitimate vote. We're not saying that it's illegitimate. We're just saying that this legitimate vote should have dire consequences towards it. Obviously, the EU wasn't very happy with this vote. I don't think anyone really was happy with this vote. Let's talk about the sustainability of the EU. Sit down. So what we said was that the sustainability of the EU runs a lot not only on its trade deals, but individuals having their buy-in so that we have enough capital to do a lot of things such as helping immigration policies, having a lot of monetary policies within these particular nations. We told you that the trend now is that big countries tend to not want to do this. And the only thing member of BOC said about this is, yeah, it's fine, they already give the floating economy, they're already big players. I think that's the exact dangerous thing that happens in this world. Because in the EU, there is obviously a power dynamic of these big countries, right? And that's exactly what the UK did. They tried to strong arm these people by saying that we are contributing a lot to the EU, therefore we should be able to leave and fend for ourselves. I think if we do not punish them as a collective bloc, a lot of other big countries will realize that maybe we can do this too. Maybe we can ride on this populism, maybe we can ride on these xenophobic things, but we'll still be okay, right? Because in the end, we're still a big country and they'll still need us to begin with. I think the best time to act is right now. For the first big country who left, this whole EU as a collective bloc punishes them to begin with, right? I think that also, the people, I think it's just quite easy to understand the flow, which is just right now, if they do not buy in, a lot of things that EU does, the benefits that Ee Jenn talked to you about helping immigration, about helping all these monetary policies, wouldn't be able to be done to the point at which we allow these big countries to strong arm all these smaller countries in the EU without any punitive measures or without any consequence towards them. The outcome of this is that these big countries have to listen, because although I am big, I still do not want to get fucked over and have punitive measures by the EU happen to me. Therefore, I'm more likely to comply and listen, because although complying seems like a cost, there is a bigger cost if I do not comply with the regulations of the EU. So the EU sustains in our work. Thank you.
Unfortunately, even after the government's whip, Patrick's question still stands. As to why this isn't a blatant overreaction from the end of the European Union, and why this necessarily is the best move in the interest of all stakeholders involved, not just necessarily the EU and what the EU should do when it comes to teaching individuals consequences. The whip says it's not a lesson extension, but then a lot of the things that they say sounded a lot like wanting to teach someone a lesson, i.e. saying things like there are dire consequences if you do something. So I think that kind of explains why their extension still relatively is similar to what opening government wants to talk about, but I'll give CG credit where it's due. They do a little bit better job in terms of just telling us what that will look like. I'll deal with that best case and I'll tell you why, even when I take into the account the best possible benefit of like teaching the UK a lesson, why A, like they don't deal with a large chunk of material that comes out of Patrick's speech when he tells you that the UK has alternatives that they can employ and why they can shield themselves from all the negative repercussions that the EU can possibly do right now. But in the worst case, even if the UK suffers, well, I'll tell you in principle, it's unfair. And I'll talk to you about the 3 extensions and why we think that's the most important material in contrast to opening opposition. Before I talk about the 3 extensions, I want to take out one thing specifically that the closing government wants to talk about, which is this idea and rhetoric that because of the fact that the voter chose to prioritize nationalism over rational economic consequences, that we ought to hold them accountable and teach them a lesson. On principle alone, I'm uncertain as to why this is fair. I am not certain as to why individuals cannot choose nationalism as a valid and legitimate basis to cast a vote. If so, they determine and they want to care that being like independent of the EU is something that's important to their livelihood and their sovereignty. Each country has a right to do that. People have a right to vote to be independent if they want to. They don't explain why inherently this is a harmful thing to do, and insofar people have a right to do that and distance themselves from other actors from a trade deal, not like some kind of holy like agreement that they had in the past. People should be able to do this because it was a mutually consensual transaction. The EU did allow you to move out. The EU was willing to negotiate various different deals and eventually agreed to leave at the end of the day anyway. So we told you already this is an active act of infantilizing the voters. But the reason why they cannot also say that we also that when the whip responded to the POI from Patrick and said we're not saying the vote was illegitimate, you kind of are saying the vote is illegitimate every time you say that nationalism isn't a valid basis. Every time you say things like they didn't have enough time or like nationalism isn't a valid basis, you are not allowing the reality to tell you that they had 4 years to vote. For example, there were so many counter to the misinformation campaigns that existed. People who like literally resigned when they were called out. See Nigel Farage, and May literally was asked to fuck off as well. All of these are valid reasons to believe that people wanted to opt into these benefits. Therefore, the EU should just independently decide that they should harm them, especially throughout the entire agreement they were willing to step out. And every point in time they kept on saying, we don't need you as well. In fact, you are the one that's more dependent upon us. Upon you leaving, we can thrive. You will be the one that suffers at the end. If this is true, why must the EU continue to punish the UK afterwards is a question that still remains in this debate. 3 extensions and why I think the direct extensions take out every team in this debate. But before I say this, though, thank you, I just want to point out that opening opposition is a little bit weird in that their argument about how it harms the UK people and you ought to prioritize the UK people is kind of moot because that argument also can apply to the EU people. So you can also say the EU people also have a right and never consented to Brexit as well. So that this becomes a zero-sum game about like which people do we matter more, and no one in the opening half did a way in to explain why one matters, and then there's the whole race riot thing. If you want to buy that, feel free to buy that. Cool, 3 extensions. The first with regards to the EU fractionalizing and why we think that is a harm that I don't think the closing government responds to. Why do we think that every country within the EU is going to be significantly screwed over by virtue of you placing punitive trade deals on the EU, on the UK? We told you that there are 2 incentives for Eurosceptic parties even within the EU and movements, for example, that are incredibly Eurosceptic, i.e. things like Alternative for Germany and things like the 5-star movement in Italy and Spain are going to significantly move away from good trade deals within the EU and aids every country within the EU and move towards individual brokering of bilateral trade agreements that will lead to the fractionalization of the EU as a whole. So every time the CG says that smaller countries are going to be screwed over, we're telling you similarly as well that they have more of an incentive to get screwed over because firstly, the smaller countries that are economically more screwed over are the ones that already have really prominent Eurosceptic parties and are more likely going to distance themselves when they see things like, for example, number 1, the EU backtracking on what they said, because when they said that we can survive through Brexit, we can do well, and now backtracking and being punitive towards a country is literally an act of just like not being consistent with what your stance is in terms of how you would fare after leaving the UK. But secondarily, also the cost to the European Union when it comes to having to sustain the trade war against the UK in a world where the US is willing to also strong arm and help the UK as well. You would have to have so much money to tariff absorption. They would have to literally take a cost towards the EU economy as well, which is the blatant harm that the closing government and no team on the gov wanted to deal with. They just assumed that by virtue of placing punitive trade deals, everyone is just going to kowtow and bow towards the EU. That's just not how it looks like. Even within the EU, you're going to have fractionalization. That's why we think it's too huge of a cost for you to just teach a lesson and to let people to feel better at the end of the day. That was dismissive. From the wave speech. Before that, I'll take opening.
So do you actually think Eurosceptic parties are able to get lost children and prove that even without being a member of the EU, you're still able to read the same language?
Eurosceptic parties what?
Will get a lot stronger.
No, I don't think they'll get stronger. Yeah, I can already explain why they'll get stronger under our world because of two reasons I told you just now, the two incentives. But secondarily, let's talk about the global trade effect and why I think Patrick's extension about the US having an incentive to align with the UK is the one that literally wins us this debate. We've already gave you contextual and incentive structural analysis to explain to you why the US has an incentive to align with the UK. The fact that they're currently losing Israel right now, you see that Trump is cozying up to Modi, and the fact that Boris Johnson and Trump are more likely going to defend each other in a world where the EU is already currently seen as an adversary towards the US right now, when they are citing things like Iran, when they're not listening to the sanctions that the US is placing on Iran. All of these are reasons for them to continue to side with the UK and to provide them the help that they need in order to sustain the blow that's likely going to come from the EU. What you would just have is various losses at various fronts from countries in a cycle of trade wars that we think is horrible for the global economy. And this is why I think it's really nice the way Patrick flowed his extension, because the third thing that he told you was the global contagion effect, and this is the process that you end up happening at the end of the day. When every country literally places a trade war and you're looking at global superpowers doing this upon each other, you will literally cause an incredible amount of instability in the global economy. You will literally cause the inability for countries to be able to sustain economically in the long run. For all these reasons, we argue to you, stand on the side that is rational.